buried beneath the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. There stands a fortress so secure, even time struggles to escape it. They call it ADX Florence. A clean version of hell. Inside these walls, men spend years locked in silence. Trapped in concrete boxes that swallow every sound, and every feeling. It's a place designed not just to cage the body, but to erase the mind. Here, punishment isn't death. It's time itself. If you enjoy stories that reveal the world's most hidden places, make sure to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like, and share this video. Your support helps uncover the untold truths behind the walls that few have ever seen. Now, imagine a place built not for redemption, but for silence. A fortress of steel and concrete buried beneath the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. A facility designed so completely that even time seems to hesitate before passing through its gates. This is the world of ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the United States. A structure that exists to contain, control, and ultimately erase the presence of those who dwell within it. From the air it looks ordinary, a cluster of gray shapes against the desert floor. But as you draw closer, the sense of isolation grows heavier, like the air itself has been taught to keep secrets. The wind here moves differently. It doesn't whistle or roar. It presses against the walls as if it, too, wishes to escape the silence inside. Miles from the nearest town, the prison stands alone, surrounded by fences that shimmer with razor wire and towers that never blink. Each tower holds a pair of watchful eyes. Guards see everything but touch almost nothing. Most will never stand face to face with an inmate. Contact is a risk that ADX does not allow. The design is precise, mathematical, almost elegant in its cruelty. Every corridor bends slightly, blocking a direct line of sight. Every cell is positioned to prevent conversation. Every door is built to open remotely, so no one needs to stand too close. From the outside it appears motionless, but within, the rhythm is mechanical. Doors slide open with a hiss, food trays move through narrow slots, lights flicker on and off according to an unchanging schedule. Nothing happens by chance. Even the air is measured, filtered, circulated, and reclaimed before being released again. The people sent here are called the worst of the worst. But within these walls, identity dissolves. Uniforms replace names. Numbers replace stories. The past becomes something distant, almost imagined, and the present stretches endlessly forward. Inside each cell, space is minimal. A concrete bed molded from the floor. A small metal toilet bolted to the wall. A desk that never moves. The window is no larger than a slit, just enough to let a thin blade of light crawl across the wall each day. When night falls, the light disappears completely. Darkness in ADX Florence is not an absence, it is a presence. It fills the corners, slides along the walls, and settles in the corners of the mind. Some say the silence hums, a low vibration that comes from nowhere yet never stops. Every sound matters here. A shoe against the floor, a key turning, a tray scraping metal. Each echo becomes part of the architecture. The silence is never empty, it listens. The facility was built for control, not just of bodies, but of every possible variable. Temperature, timing, movement, sound. All carefully balanced to eliminate unpredictability. It's the kind of control that feels invisible until you notice how completely it surrounds you. There are no bars to rattle, no communal shouts. Only solid doors and sealed windows. The world beyond those walls could vanish, and the inmates might never know. That's the point. The isolation extends to every aspect of life. Meals arrive through a slot, 3 times a day, at the same hour. Exercise is permitted once daily in a small, high-walled enclosure open only to the sky. Even then, the prisoner stands alone, surrounded by concrete, unseen and unheard. The system is efficient. It doesn't rely on confrontation. It relies on absence, the absence of noise, of touch, of time itself. The absence becomes the punishment. For those who live here, the days blur together. Sunlight filters in and fades away, but meaning disappears with it. Without conversation or clocks, the human mind begins to float. Some prisoners mark days with scratches on the wall, others simply stop counting. Psychologists say that humans need connection the way lungs need air. But here, connection is a privilege denied by design. Letters are screened, visits are rare, phone calls are brief and distant. The system keeps the outside world at arm's length until it no longer feels real. Some describe ADX as a monument to order. Others call it a monument to fear. Either way, it stands as proof that control can be absolute when the human element is stripped away. Even the staff feel its weight. Guards speak in low tones. Movements are rehearsed, precise, mechanical. In a place where even a whisper can echo forever, no one wishes to disturb the balance. The silence that rules this prison is not a mistake, it's the foundation. Every inch of concrete was poured with that purpose. To quiet rebellion. To suppress emotion. To keep the world out and the mind in. For the men confined within, time becomes a mirror. Memories replay endlessly, sharper with each repetition. Faces of loved ones fade until they're nothing but outlines in the dark. The mind fills the emptiness with echoes of its own making. To survive here is to learn to live with those echoes. To find meaning in routine, comfort in stillness, identity in isolation. Some manage it for years. Others don't. Outside these walls, life continues. Seasons change, cities move, voices fill the air. Inside, everything stands still. The prison doesn't sleep, and it never wakes. Every day begins exactly as the one before, and every night ends without relief. The cycle is perfect, unbroken, and merciless. It is the rhythm of a place that was never meant to change. And in that rhythm, silence wins. It seeps into every thought, every breath, every memory that dares to survive. Until finally, even the noise within the mind begins to fade. What remains isn't a scream or a whisper. It's just the sound of nothing. A silence so deep it almost feels alive. And it will stay that way, long after the lights go out. Silence fills the corridors of ADX Florence, but inside those walls, the real noise begins. Not the sound of footsteps or keys, but the sound that comes from within the human mind when it has nowhere else to go. At first, most inmates believe they can handle it. They tell themselves they've survived worse. They've faced danger, violence, chaos, but nothing prepares anyone for the kind of stillness that lives here. It isn't a break from the world, it's a slow erasure of it. Days pass without voices, without faces, without change. The air feels thick, the light always the same. When nothing around you moves, you start to question whether you still do. The brain begins to fill the silence with its own creations. Some prisoners start hearing faint knocks in the walls. They swear someone is there, just beyond the concrete, trying to speak to them. Others begin to talk to the light itself, following its daily crawl across the floor as though it were a companion. A few start keeping time by the pattern of meals or the hum of ventilation, fragments of rhythm in an endless void. Sleep doesn't come easily. Without the cues of day and night, the body forgets when to rest. Inmates report sleeping for minutes at a time, waking up convinced they've been out for hours. Dreams bleed into waking moments, and soon it becomes difficult to tell which one is real. Psychologists who have studied long-term isolation describe it as a kind of sensory famine. When sight, sound, and touch are rationed, the mind feeds on itself. Memory becomes louder, sharper, almost painful. Old regrets replay like films you can't turn off. Many inmates describe the first real breakdown as quiet. It doesn't happen in screams. It starts with forgetting what day it is, then forgetting why that even matters. Speech begins to fade, the voice grows strange to the ear. And once language starts to dissolve, thought follows. The human brain was built for connection. Neurons mirror each other, emotions synchronize, time flows through conversation and routine. Take that away, and the structure starts to crumble. Inside ADX, you can almost feel that crumbling, not of concrete, but of consciousness itself. One former inmate said that after years of silence, he began to forget what words felt like in his mouth. He spoke to the walls just to hear a sound, even if it wasn't an answer. Another said he memorized every crack in the floor, every imperfection, until he began to see faces in them. The cell becomes both a sanctuary and a trap, a world so small it starts to swallow you whole. Mental health workers who visit ADX describe eyes that don't focus the same way as others. Some stare straight through, others flick nervously from corner to corner, expecting movement that never comes. It's not fear anymore. It's a kind of vacancy, a defense the brain builds to survive what it cannot process. Hallucinations are common. Some prisoners hear music, others whispers, a few even claim to see people sitting quietly in their cells. No one knows if the visions comfort them or torment them, perhaps both. Reality stretches thin, like glass under pressure, and eventually, it begins to crack. There's a phenomenon psychologists call SHU syndrome, named after special housing units, another word for solitary confinement. Symptoms include anxiety, paranoia, panic attacks, and memory loss. But inside ADX, it goes further. It becomes existential. Prisoners start questioning whether they exist to anyone at all. Letters, when they come, arrive late and heavily censored. Every line is reviewed, every phrase monitored. Even love has to pass through inspection. When contact is that limited, affection becomes something dangerous, a reminder of what can't be reached. For those who had families, the distance grows unbearable. Months turn into years, and voices on the phone begin to sound like ghosts. Some stop calling altogether. It's not that they don't care, it's that hope hurts more than silence. And so, a strange transformation begins. The prisoner no longer fights the isolation, he becomes part of it. The silence that once tormented him becomes familiar, even comforting. It's the only thing that never leaves. This adaptation isn't healing, it's surrender. A way of existing without truly living. The body remains, but the personality fades. Behavior becomes robotic, predictable, stripped of emotion. It's as if the prison has rewritten the person. Over time, some inmates lose the ability to interact even when given the chance. They look away when spoken to, hesitate before answering, and forget how to form full sentences. Re-entry into the general population, if it ever happens, often feels like being dropped into a storm. Noise, light, human contact, things once taken for granted, now overwhelm the senses. Those who have left ADX rarely speak publicly about it. When they do, their words come slowly, measured, uncertain. It's not just what they experienced, but what they lost, the simple rhythm of human life. One described it as learning to be human again, a process that takes years, if it ever completes at all. In a rare interview, a former psychologist from the facility said something chilling. He said that ADX doesn't just confine people, it edits them. Every rule, every wall, every silence is designed to reduce what is human until only obedience remains. He paused before adding, "It works too well." The effects aren't confined to the inmates alone. Their letters, their mental health reports, their sudden withdrawals, all speak to a truth that even data can't capture. That isolation isn't just a condition, it's a slow form of disappearance. In the stillness, a man can lose himself without ever moving an inch. Time stretches, thoughts echo, and eventually, the self begins to fade like dust in a sunbeam. What remains is not madness, exactly, but something colder, quieter, harder to define. A vacancy that looks a lot like peace, but isn't. Outside, the world imagines punishment as noise, sirens, shouting, chaos. But inside ADX Florence, punishment has no sound. It whispers instead, reshaping the mind from the inside out. The longer you stay, the less of you comes back. Even the strongest eventually feel it, the weight of their own thoughts pressing down like stone. 1,000 days of silence become one. Dreams fade into repetition. And the line between being alive and simply existing grows too thin to tell apart. When people speak of justice, they rarely picture this, the endless hum of ventilation, the soft thud of footsteps, the sound of nothing else. But here, justice has another face. It's quiet, patient, absolute. It doesn't need to shout. It only needs time. And in ADX Florence, time is the one thing that never runs out. The story of ADX Florence begins long before its doors ever closed behind the first inmate. It began as an idea, that control could be absolute. That architecture itself could enforce obedience where force had failed. In the early 1990s, after a string of violent incidents inside federal prisons, the government decided to create a facility that would make escape, rebellion, even conversation, impossible. The design brief was simple in theory, terrifying in practice: build a place where no one could harm another soul, not even themselves. Every detail of ADX was engineered toward that purpose. Engineers and psychologists worked together, combining concrete and behavior science. They studied movement, perception, and sound. How far the human voice carries down a hallway. How long a person can stand silence before it becomes unbearable. They took those findings and built them into the blueprint. The result was a kind of mathematical isolation. Hallways are not straight, but slightly angled, breaking sightlines so inmates can never see further than a few meters. Cells are positioned so that no two windows ever face each other. Even the yard, where prisoners exercise, is divided into narrow concrete pens, open to the sky but walled on all sides, like vertical graves. There are no communal spaces here. No cafeterias, no workshops, no shared recreation rooms. Every movement is controlled by automation, steel doors sliding open with a dull electric hiss, closing again with a seal tight enough to muffle breathing. Each sound that escapes dies quickly against concrete. The prison was built into a landscape that mirrors its purpose. Miles of empty terrain surround it, dry, silent, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. From a distance, ADX looks small, almost harmless, but step closer and the air feels different. Heavy. Still. As if the ground itself has been trained not to echo. Every part of the building was designed for separation. Even the light is controlled, fluorescent, colorless, consistent. No shadows deep enough to hide in, no warmth to remind anyone of the sun. The cells face different directions, catching only a sliver of natural light for a few minutes each day. Then it's gone, replaced by the soft buzz of artificial brightness. Cameras watch every corridor, every gate, every door. They never blink. Their presence is constant, a reminder that even when alone, no one here is unseen. Each cell has an electronic monitoring system linked directly to a central hub, where guards track movement through screens rather than windows. It is control by design, surveillance as architecture. The human element is reduced to observation. Guards rarely speak to inmates directly. Instructions come through intercoms, voices flattened by static and distance. Interaction is brief, mechanical, stripped of tone. There's no need for confrontation, the structure itself enforces compliance. Every line, every surface, every mechanism was calculated to remove uncertainty. Doors lock automatically. Meals slide in through slots. Communication is filtered through layers of security and silence. Even the air system plays a role. Each cell has its own ventilation shaft, separate from the others, preventing sound from traveling. What seems like a technical detail is actually psychological. It stops prisoners from realizing they are not truly alone. The design ensures they cannot even hear another heartbeat but their own. Inside the control room, dozens of screens glow at all hours. Cameras display walls, doors, and the occasional flicker of motion. It looks peaceful, almost serene, but beneath that calm lies an unbroken vigilance. Guards monitor routine, a man pacing, a meal delivered, a light turning off at exactly the same second as the day before. Predictability is safety. Deviation is danger. The precision of the system creates its own rhythm. The same sounds repeat every hour, every day, every year. The click of a lock, the slide of a tray, the hum of electricity in the walls. It becomes a kind of heartbeat for the entire complex, mechanical, steady, eternal. Some architects have called ADX Florence a machine for living, but living is not what it produces. It produces order. Stillness. The illusion that control can replace connection. In this place, structure is not a background, it's the main character. The isolation is layered, not only physical but psychological. Each barrier reinforces the next. Distance from others becomes distance from self. Inmates begin to feel like part of the system that confines them, one gear in a machine too large to resist. Even the way the building sounds plays a part. The acoustics are tuned to swallow echoes. A word spoken aloud doesn't travel, it dies in the air, leaving only the memory of its sound. That quiet is deliberate. It denies the human instinct to reach out, to call, to be heard. The materials themselves were chosen for endurance. Concrete that absorbs impact. Glass that doesn't shatter. Metal that resists rust and sound alike. The result is permanence, a structure that feels less like a building and more like a verdict carved into the earth. From the control center, the entire prison can be operated without direct contact. Doors, lights, cameras, communication, all respond to a button or switch. It's an ecosystem of precision where human error has been nearly removed. That efficiency comes at a cost. The more perfect the control, the less room there is for humanity. The architects called it safety. Critics called it isolation perfected. Whichever word you choose, the outcome is the same, a place where chaos has been erased so completely that even emotion feels out of place. For most, the design is invisible. But for those who live within it, every inch is felt. The narrow window that never opens. The lights that never dim. The cold metal door that marks the boundary between one life and the rest of the world. Each detail reminds the prisoner of the same truth: the system does not bend. There are no cracks to slip through, no gaps to reach across. It is total, unyielding, complete. And that is what makes ADX Florence so different from any other prison. It doesn't just hold people. It reshapes the meaning of confinement. The punishment isn't what's done to you, it's what the place prevents you from becoming. Even decades after its construction, engineers still refer to it with a kind of uneasy pride. A structure that achieves exactly what it was designed for. A place where silence is engineered and solitude is the foundation stone. Standing in the center of it, you can almost feel the intention built into every wall. A precision so pure it becomes terrifying. The prison doesn't have to fight for control anymore, it is control. And it doesn't need to speak to remind anyone who truly holds the power here. Because in ADX Florence, power doesn't shout. It hums quietly through concrete and steel. It's in the light that never changes, in the air that never carries a voice, in the design that never forgets its purpose. The architecture doesn't move, doesn't sleep, doesn't forgive. It simply watches. And it always wins. There are moments when the system must touch the human world. Moments that break the rhythm, just for a second, before the silence returns. A door opens. Footsteps echo down the corridor. Then it's gone again. Inside ADX Florence, contact is both rare and rehearsed. When a guard approaches a cell, every motion follows a procedure. 2 officers. Keys and codes. Voices low, clipped, professional. No conversation beyond what's required. The prisoner steps back as the slot opens. A tray slides through. The door closes. Metal on metal. Silence again. That is how most communication happens here, through a wall, through glass, through layers of protocol. Even eye contact is filtered, indirect. A reflection caught in the edge of a polished surface, gone before either person can recognize the other. For many guards, that's by design. Detachment keeps them safe, from danger, from empathy, from the weight of what the place demands. They are trained to operate like extensions of the system itself. Efficient. Unshaken. Anonymous. But not all of them succeed. A few have spoken, quietly, long after they left. They describe a strange kind of exhaustion, not physical, but emotional. The fatigue of silence. The dull ache of routine. One guard said it felt like time stopped moving, not just for the inmates, but for everyone inside those walls. Every task becomes ritual. Door check. Meal delivery. Head count. Each action done exactly the same way, at exactly the same time. To break that rhythm feels like breaking a law of physics. The human voice sounds out of place here. Even when it's necessary, during medical checks, evaluations, or brief conversations, it seems to echo too loudly, like an intruder in a space built for quiet. The walls absorb most of the sound, but what's left still feels wrong. Soft. Fragile. Unnatural. Some of the prisoners haven't heard another person speak directly to them in years. When they do, the response is often delayed, uncertain. Their sense of timing fades. Speech becomes effort. Some start whispering to themselves, testing their voice, reminding their mind it still exists. Psychologists call it sensory deprivation. But inside ADX, it's more than that, it's a slow unmaking of human rhythm. Days merge. Dreams and waking moments blur. Reality becomes routine, and routine becomes the only proof that time still passes. The design isolates every sense. Touch is limited to cold concrete and steel. Smell fades into antiseptic air. Hearing is confined to mechanical hums and distant locks. Sight, reduced to the same four walls. Taste, identical every day. Each sensation starved until the mind starts to feed on itself. There are cameras everywhere, but no mirrors. A prisoner can go years without seeing his own reflection. Imagine that, existing without proof that you still have a face. No one ages here the way people do outside. They erode, quietly, like stone under constant wind. When medical staff arrive, the interaction is clinical. Vitals checked through bars. Medication handed through slots. The encounter lasts minutes. No small talk. No questions that don't matter. It's care without connection. Some inmates write letters. They can, in theory. But every letter is read, screened, delayed. Weeks pass before an envelope leaves the building. Many stop trying. The silence wins again. Even the guards admit, this is not punishment in the traditional sense. It's something slower, quieter, deeper. One described it as watching a candle burn with no flame. You don't see the moment it goes out. You just realize one day that the light is gone. There are security teams here who never meet the people they monitor. They sit behind screens, observing numbers, movements, patterns. If something changes, they act, remotely, efficiently. It's the kind of control that removes both danger and empathy. Everything personal is reduced to data. Once in a while, a psychiatrist walks down the corridor. Their voices are calm, practiced. They ask about mood, sleep, appetite. The answers are short. They write notes on clipboards and move on. The system collects information, but rarely understanding. Sometimes, late at night, the silence shifts. A noise, faint, far away, a shout, a clang, something unidentifiable. It fades quickly, swallowed by concrete. No one reacts. The next morning, the routine continues as if nothing happened. In this environment, reality becomes fragile. Without variation, without connection, the mind begins to invent both. Some inmates say they hear music that isn't there. Others claim to smell rain even though no air from outside ever enters their cell. The brain, deprived of input, starts creating its own. There are records of men pacing for hours, tracing the same pattern until the floor wears smooth beneath their feet. Others stop moving altogether. They stare at the wall for days, unblinking, conserving thought like oxygen. The silence becomes both enemy and companion. And yet, the system continues, perfect, mechanical, relentless. It doesn't notice the breakdown. It wasn't built to notice. It was built to maintain order, and order does not require empathy. Sometimes, when new staff arrive, they're warned about it. They're told to leave the job at the door. To never think too long about the people behind the walls. To remember that the system knows best. Most obey. The few who don't rarely stay long. One former officer described walking the tier late one evening. He said it felt like the building itself was alive, breathing, listening, waiting. He could sense eyes on him, though he knew no one could see. The cameras watched everything. He said he began to feel like he was the one being imprisoned. That's the strange thing about ADX Florence. It doesn't just contain. It consumes. It absorbs everything that enters, noise, time, emotion, until nothing remains but the system itself. Years go by. Guards retire. Prisoners vanish into transfers or silence. But the structure remains unchanged. It doesn't age. It doesn't decay. It simply endures. And within that endurance lies its power. It teaches those inside, guard and inmate alike, that control can outlast memory. That silence can rewrite truth. That even time bends under enough routine. No one truly leaves ADX Florence untouched. Some walk out after decades, blinking into the sunlight, uncertain if the world is still real. Others never make it out at all, their stories ending quietly, behind soundproof doors. And yet, for every name forgotten, for every voice that faded, the system continues exactly as designed. Unbroken. Unaffected. Untouched. That's the paradox at the heart of it all. The more perfect the control becomes, the less human the place feels. But in that absence, in that precision, something darker begins to grow. Because even in silence, nothing stays truly still forever. Pressure builds. Cracks form. And in a place designed to never make noise, it's often the quietest moments that hide the loudest truths. Over time, everything inside begins to blur. The walls, the faces, the routines. Even the difference between punishment and survival fades away. What started as a system of control becomes a kind of silence that no one can escape. Some who leave never speak about what they saw here. Others try, but the words don't seem to fit. How do you describe a place where nothing moves, but everything changes you? Where a man can disappear without dying? Years of isolation alter the brain. Doctors say it dulls the senses, fractures memory, and rewires emotion. But the truth is harder to measure. You can't chart what happens when a person forgets what a voice sounds like. When a heartbeat becomes the only reminder that you're still alive. There are stories, whispered by those who've been inside, of men who begin talking to shadows. Not from madness, but from need. The human mind cannot survive endless quiet. It reaches out, invents company, finds meaning in echoes. And sometimes, those echoes start answering back. For guards, it's different. They see pieces of the whole, moments of routine, fragments of collapse. But they too are changed. They learn to stop reacting, to detach, to operate on instinct. Some say that after years on the job, they start hearing the silence even when they're home. Like the building followed them. Like something inside ADX never lets go. Outside, the world moves forward. News changes. Generations pass. But here, the same sun rises over the same concrete every morning. And deep inside, the same cells wait. Each one identical. Each one holding a story that will never be told. If you could walk through those halls, you wouldn't hear anger. You wouldn't even hear regret. You'd hear something stranger. A kind of stillness that feels alive, like the air itself is watching, listening, remembering. That's the legacy of ADX Florence. Not the crimes. Not the sentences. But the silence that endures after the voices are gone. A silence so complete that it becomes its own kind of truth. And somewhere in that silence, there's a question no one has answered. If a place can strip away everything human, does anything of the soul remain? Or does it vanish, quietly, into the same darkness that built the walls in the first place? That's the story of the most secure prison in America, a fortress that was never just made of steel and stone, but of control, isolation, and time itself. And though it was built to contain the most dangerous minds, it may have done something far greater. It built a mirror, reflecting what happens when power becomes silence. Because in the end, ADX Florence isn't just a prison. It's a reminder that even the strongest systems are haunted by what they try to erase. And that somewhere, deep beneath the concrete and the order, the echoes of the people who once lived there are still whispering to be heard. If this story made you stop for a moment, if it made you feel that silence just a little too closely, then don't leave it here. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories hidden behind closed doors. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Like and share this video. Because sometimes, the only way to break the silence is to make sure the world listens.